What's up, YouTube? Brian Van Dyne here. Today I got a special little project I'm working on. This is my grandfather's 2010 Mini Cooper automatic. And I wanted to show you guys some of the basic things that I think are important to note when you start working on this particular motor. Just some heads ups. When you go to do this, what you will need to do is you'll need to take these loose because they put a lot of pressure on the rollers and you know, the cam coming out. I only found one video on YouTube showing this process, but it's a different motor and it's a different style, and also it was a manual transmission. This is an automatic transmission. So I just want to kind of go over some of the things that are a little bit different. You got torques that are coming off of these, and then right here you have the timing and everything. One thing that was different that is kind of noteworthy, that timing, that's for the timing chain slack. We didn't take that off. I didn't take that off to do this job. I may have to take it off or loosen it to reposition these. I'm not sure yet. But so one thing that I did to get the motor in time that you can't do with the manual is, obviously you can't spin the tire to get the motor top dead center, right? So what I did is we pulled out the spark plugs, and then we used the E-Torx bolt on this sprocket right here, and we rotated the motor over until we were able to get the cams lined up. Let me show you how that works. So I bought this kit on Amazon. These are the two you're going to use for this particular car. You're going to bolt those two together, and then you're going to set this on the cam, right? You're going to line up the cam. So these squares right here will line up with this part of the cam, both parts of the cam. It can only go on one way, right? See that? See how it's square? See my timing mark right there? It's kind of hard to see with the light, but that can only go on in one spot, and that's where it goes on, right? So I got it all in time, lined up the cams with the writing on the top, marked them, marked everything. And then also, when you get that straight up and down, that allows you to put particular set. See the key right there? So if you look down in this hole, let's see if I can see. You can see it, boom, right there. You can see the little key is going through the flex plate, right? So when you get the motor to top dead center, you'll know it's top dead center and in time when the cam is straight up and down. And this one right here has writing on it. Let's see. Boom, there it is. It's kind of hard to see because I didn't wipe off the writing. Boom, there it is right there. All right, you can see the writing on there. That's where the writing is. The writing will be up. Let me see if I can wipe that off so you can see it better. Anyways, there's writing on there. That will be up. And that's how you'll know it's in top dead center, right? You have to lock the cams in place in order to get these two bolts out, these E-Torques. And then on top of that, you want the flywheel locked, right? Because if this chain, or when you go to pressurize the cylinder with air so that the valve doesn't fall down, you don't want the motor rotating, right? And if you put air pressure into that cylinder, chances are it would rotate the motor, right? If that key is not in there. So just remember that. Very important. That's all I really got to say for now. Yeah. Next step is I need to bolt this thing up and then take the valve springs off, which I have this tool I bought off of Amazon. I'll put links in the description for both of these tool kits, right? This one is to take the valve springs off, which is, it's pretty simple how it goes. I'll shine a basic idea how it works. I'm also gonna put a tool set for these E-Torques. You will need these. You can't do the job without them, because I've never done this job before. When we pulled the valve cover off, I kind of moved it sideways to clear something, and we broke these rubber things. Just they're not even flexible like they're supposed to be, but two of the rubber broke, so I bought 2 new ignition coils. So just remember, when you can pull these straight out, which is what I would do next time if I were to do this separately. Pull these straight out. They're kind of just wedged in there with the gasket. You can just pull them straight out. I would do that, or just make sure when you pull the valve cover off, you're pulling straight up, because I moved it slightly to the side to clear something, and yeah, it broke 2 of those. So I think you can buy just this rubber gasket, but whatever, the car has 100,000 something miles on it, so we'll just replace the whole coil itself. So that's where I'm at in the repair. If I find anything else interesting or important, I'll make sure I note it in a video. Another thing to note, I saw a comment in the other guy's video saying that you can stick a rope down in there and that will hold the valve up. You turn the motor. That's not possible, because number one, you're keying the flex plate with that holder key, right? Which will not allow you to spin the crankshaft, which will not allow the pistons to come up or down. So you can't really use a rope to hold the valve up unless you just jam rope in there and just keep jamming and jamming and jamming. It's not really going to hold the valve up. Also, I wouldn't try a balloon because it would probably pop. So this is literally the best method that you can possibly do. And then on top of that, you don't have to worry about retiming the crankshaft, which I suppose you could do it if you pulled the key out. Well, you got everything in time, marked everything, then pulled the key out the bottom, then rotated it. But then you're going to have to find where that key goes in to line up to time everything when you go to put these back on and everything else. So this is just way more simpler. Do it this way. Okay, so one thing I want to mention about this kit is it does not come with the right adapter for the 2010 Mini Cooper Clubman, right? So what I ended up doing was taking a spark plug, and I ended up welding it to these 2 pieces, and then this threaded into this, right? And that's pretty much what I did. As I butchered the spark plug, just like the other guy in the other video. I just took a spark plug, I unthreaded this, and then the stem broke off in the middle, so I had to pound it out, and it was kind of an ordeal. But anyways, I got it out. I ended up welding it to this piece that was in the kit. That way I wasn't using something of my own. Also, I welded that to this, which this threads into that. This would not thread into this one. So that's how I did that. I just welded these two sections together. And then I put my own air fitting on this because I have a different air system than the ones that are provided. I do a lot of heavy duty work here. I mean, look, there you can see there's a 13-liter PACCAR MX-13 head sitting right there. So I did have the air pressure, the air governor set to 100 PSI, and that was sufficient to hold all the valves up. There was only one valve that I ended up pushing down, and it was kind of stuck to the spring or something, but it did push the valve in. But because of the air pressure, it pushed it right back up. So that only happened to me once out of the 16 times. So I would just keep that in mind when you are, doing yours. I would have some sort of air compressor that I would think 100 PSI minimum for this. One other thing I want to note, when you're putting in those collets, right? Because this is a spring, right? Both collets are in there perfectly aligned. If you use, I've been pushing down and letting up to kind of align the collets. Be very, very careful. If they get under spring tension and they're not aligned properly, they can fly out. I just had one fly out. Luckily, it landed on my arm. But that right there could be a devastating loss of a crucial piece that you need. So keep that in mind when you're putting those collets in. And I would say grease is your friend. Use a lot of grease, right? Because it helps hold those collets onto that valve, and it helps hold them on to, whether you're using a flathead screwdriver. I did use a flathead screwdriver, but this one was a little too short. The flathead was nice because I could keep it at a certain angle, but that one's too short, so I just ended up using this pick, which is quite a bit longer, to maneuver in there. But just keep that in mind when you're putting those collets in. They are very, very, how do I put it? Temperamental. Another thing I would do, and what I've been doing, is I've been putting hash marks for every single valve stem seal that I've been replacing, right? So you can see I replaced 1 and 4 first, right? And you can replace 1 and 4 if you put these 2 brackets in the center. It makes it pretty easy. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the brackets to the outside and then replace 2 and 3 for all the valve stem seals. And I have been able to push those down without removing this sort of shaft. I'm not sure what shaft that is called. I was attempting to remove it, and I pulled that off, and then I realized that I'd have to take this whole cap part off, and I don't know if there's a seal or a gasket underneath that, so I just opted to just pushing it down with it there. You can do it. You do have to reposition this to the outside, the far outside, and then you end up using this to push down on the collets. That's how this works, to push down those springs, basically leverages. And for these, I've been using the 2 short bolts that held this cap in. You can use the long ones, but the long ones will only go all the way in if they're in the front ones. They won't go all the way in if you put it in the back ones. So I've been using these 2 short bolts that held this cap in for these, and I've been putting 2 on, and it's been sufficient to hold it. These springs are not that strong, so you don't have to worry too much about it. At least I've been careful, and it's been working great so far. So keep that in mind. Another tool you will need is a very tiny magnet to pull these collets out. When you push that spring down, the only way to get these out is a magnet. And then I've been using a long pick with grease. I put a little bit of grease on the inside of the collet and then a little bit on the outside. And I've been using that pick to get them down in there. This really would be a lot nicer if I had a second person to hold that spring tension while I try and put the collets in, but obviously I'm working by myself today, so it's not really a possibility. So keep that in mind. If you have a second person, that would make the job go a hell of a lot easier. This tool comes in pretty handy. I'll put a link in the description for this. These, see how that goes on that? Just kind of wiggle it. They're kind of suctioned on there with the oil. So I'd pick this tool up. I was using this one at first because it is, I don't know if you can tell, but it's got a slot in the center. But this one works better. All right, so as I was editing the video, I remembered a couple things that I wanted to put into the video that I did not have time to video. Anyways, let me just get into it. The cam shaft that is closer to the cab, in order to get that back in, I ended up taking those springs off. If you can do it without taking those springs off, do not take those springs off. Because what I ended up having to do, I ended up putting the camshaft all the way on and torquing all the bolts down. And then I was having a heck of a time figuring out how to put those springs back on that hold the roller rockers. And what I ended up coming up with was an idea on how to get them back in, and it required a second person. But I ended up taking 2 Allen keys, right, in the shape of 2 L's, and I ended up sticking them into the spring and pushing towards the cab. And that was enough for me to push the spring down, right? And my buddy was able to tighten that that E-Torx screw back in, right? And there's 4 of them. And then what I took was, well, first you have to loosen the black cap up, right, to fit the rollers back in, because I forgot to put the rollers in too. So I put the rollers in, I loosened up the black cap, put the rollers in, tighten the black cap back down, put the spring on, use the Allen keys to push the spring pressure down, and then he was able to thread that screw back in the top of it, right? And then what I used was a screwdriver with a notch cut into it. And then I went underneath the cam and I pushed the spring, and then I was able to maneuver it onto the roller rocker. Okay, and that's how I was able to get that done. I did not have time to video that. It was starting to get dark, and it was just sheer luck that we came up with the idea of using the Allen keys to push those, to cage those springs so we could put the screw back in. Because I had put the cam back in without the springs putting pressure on it. So it was a lot easier to put the cam in, but then I had to go back and do that. And that was kind of, if I didn't have a second person, it would have been impossible, literally impossible to do. So if you got a second person, then you're totally okay to do it that way. Put the cam in, tighten everything down, and then you'll have to pull off the two, you don't have to pull them all the way out, but there's 2 bolts that hold the black caps in. The roller rockers go in there, and they sit in the grooves on that cap. Then you push the cap down, tighten those down, the 2 that are vertical. And then you can put the spring in. You kind of have to wedge it in there, right? Just get it in there on both sides of the roller rockers. And then once you get that, you push those Allens forward, and then that brings that little triangle piece down where you can thread that screw in. And then you're able to reposition the spring. So I just wanted to add that to the whole video. Another thing that I forgot to mention is we ended up never removing or loosening up the chain tensioner, the timing chain tensioner, what I ended up doing was I took a pivoting pry bar, right? The pry bar has a pivot point where you can pivot it. You get them at Harbor Freight. They have a little pin you push in, and it allows you to pivot the pry bar part. Anyways, I used that, and I put a little tension on the timing chain, and I was able to get that timing gear on with both. I did the front forward cam first. That was easy. Just put it on, and then tightened it. Once I got the timing lockers on the cam, I was able to just put that on, get it right where it needed to be, and tighten that up. And then the second one, I had to use a pry bar just slightly to, put enough tension on it where I could slide that timing gear back onto the second cam. So we did not end up needing to take the timing tensioner off. So that's one less step. If you want to go that route, go that route. If you don't, I totally get it. So do it your way or whatever. And then those are, let's see, what are those tightened to? If I remember right. I want to say they're tightened to 180 inch-pounds and then 180 degrees. Those two screws, and you're supposed to replace them. So there's that. The other ones, the cap, the caps for the camshaft, I tightened those down to, those were tightened down to 96 inch-pounds. And then so were the Torx. Those were 96. It basically equates to like roughly 15 foot-pounds or something like that. And then that's all I can really remember. So hope that helps. Don't forget to pound that like button, pound that subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.